And joining me to break it all down, you know him, you love him, State Representative Bill Hauter. I'm honored that you've joined me on the show. That
Good
Illinois
morning.
bill did pass, but it only passed the House, right,
Yeah,
Bill? Good
it
morning. How
just
are you?
good morning. So it passed the House. Just barely passed the House. A lot of debate. We got a lot of witness slips and opposition. There was opposition groups, disability groups, religious groups. I think they got a lot of pressure. In the House, we had 5 Democrats that voted no. They actually pushed their no button. We didn't know that they worked, but we were one the electrician to check those no buttons over there on the Democrat side. But at any rate, there we actually had 5 of them. Some of the Black Caucus recognized that, you know what, there's everywhere this has been tried, physician-assisted suicide, there grows a two-tier system of care. Those who have money and have means, have good insurance, they get the latest cancer treatments, and this is I'm talking about and where it's been tried, Canada, Oregon. They have a two-tier system that develops, and I think some people in the Black Caucus, some of the reps in the Black Caucus have noticed that, and so when it did barely pass the House and went over to the Senate, they first of all, they ran out of time. I mean, it was the management of this was crazy. Well, it was to our advantage, but it was absolutely incompetent management of a lot of the bills. They just ran out of time uh, debating the budget. Of course, they gave us a budget at the last minute. To make a long story short, I think they never had the votes in the Senate, and so they were going to try to bring it up, and they ran out of time, and they knew they couldn't pass it with the amount of votes that they had as well.
Yeah, well, and I know that they had talked about this maybe the 103rd General Assembly. It was just kind of whispered, and there was some
Yeah.
press conferences and things surrounding this. So many proponents of assisted suicide frame the issue as compassionate dignity, and I wanted to have you on because you're a physician.
Yeah.
You're at ER, so tell our listeners a little bit about your background.
Well, I am a physician. I graduated in 1997 from the University of Illinois Medical School, and I've been practicing both anesthesiology, where I mostly practice at anesthesiology. I practice pediatric and adult cardiac anesthesia,
Mm.
and I have since I for 20 some years now. But I did my first residency and board certification in emergency medicine. And so I have a really unique practice, and I continue to practice in emergency departments, but just a little bit, just to keep my foot in the door in emergency medicine, so to speak. But I mostly practice anesthesiology, which has a lot to do with, the treatment of pain. And there's a chronic pain component to anesthesiology. I don't practice in that field in particular. Like I said, I practice in mostly operative OR anesthesia. But I'm active in the Illinois State Medical Society, and we've debated this topic many times at our annual meeting with resolutions, on ethics in medicine. And we just a couple months ago, we had our annual meeting, and we again debated the bills on physician-assisted suicide, and we call it physician-assisted suicide. I know a lot of the proponents of these bills, they call it medical aid in dying, and we just really object to that term, because we in medicine say we have medical aid in dying. And to your question, that's where we want to focus our compassion for these terrible stories, and just the human suffering that takes place in some terminal illnesses at the very end of life. People need they need compassionate care. They need how are you going to withdraw care? There comes a time, we understand this natural part of life is death and the dying process, and so medicine has really addressed it through palliative care and through hospice care
Mm.
and better pain treatments, and understanding the death process, the dying process, and when it's time to withdraw care. And so that's where we want to focus our energies and research and resources to our growing fields of palliative care and hospice care, and we've learned a lot. And I think we've made huge strides when you're talking about the 80s, the 90s, and where this is just starting out to where we are today, and how we're taking care of people today and trying to relieve. Now we don't. I mean, obviously there's stories out there, and that's what happened on the House floor. There's a lot of stories of people that didn't get the care that they needed. Well, that's not a reason to have them commit suicide. It's a reason to get better, at the compassionate care of hospice care.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'd be curious, how are we going to protect? And you've already kind of seen this in places like Canada. How are we going to protect these vulnerable populations, like the elderly,
Yep.
the disabled, the mentally ill, especially when we have things like Medicaid here in Illinois?
Yep.
We have a Medicaid government-sponsored
Yep.
insurance, and that's costly. You guys just passed a $55 billion budget.
Yeah.
Not you, but
Yeah.
the Democrats,
Yeah.
the state legislature, right? They passed this $55 billion budget. It's expensive to run those programs.
Sure.
And I hate to say this, but we've already seen it happen in Canada where they're killing people so that way it's cheaper for them and they don't have to dole out so many tax dollars to this program.
Yep.
And I wonder how we would protect vulnerable people like the mentally ill, the disabled, the elderly from killing themselves and committing suicide under this guise of choice, but really they're coerced to do it because, hey, it's a money making endeavor. And other countries do this where the disabled people, there's no disabled people because they're all on government health care and it's costly to keep those people alive and functioning. And they recognize that and they just kill them so that way it's not expensive. I don't know if Illinois would do that if we were to get something like this passed, but is there a concern there with this coercion?
Oh yeah, I mean it's a huge concern, and you said it really really well. Everywhere it's been tried, it expands and advances. It's almost like it's a ruse. It's a ruse to get this in, and that I think was why so many disability groups see this for what it is, and so many uh, people that represent the vulnerable, the poor, see exactly this sliding, slippery slope argument. I call it a slippery cliff. Um, but it is the expansion of it, and it's quickly becomes a duty to die. It quickly becomes you are a burden on people, and it's not even it's coercion, but it's very subtle coercion because coercion from the person that feels like there's such a burden. I mean, people with disabilities or those are terminally ill, they feel a great sense of what some of the problem is that they're my dog is whimpering in the background, of course. I'm
No,
sorry about that,
he
but
doesn't like the physician-assisted suicide bill either. He
yeah,
agrees.
right, crying about it.
Yeah, well,
But
I mean, you're treating it like we're animals. I mean,
yeah,
that's really what it feels like. Hey, we're gonna put you down.
yep,
You know what I
yep,
mean?
and the coercion comes with the great sense of I'm such a burden on people. I'm such a burden on those who love me, and they quickly have a duty to die, and then you're offered, you see in the Netherlands and other places, Canada, where it's just astonishing how quickly it advances to diabetes, and if you have depression. I could go on and on about this, but so many people with terminal illnesses, they have comorbidities like depression, feeling of hopelessness, and so then that is introduced into it. That's such a confounding variable, is like, this is this person really in the right mind, and
Mhm.
and so often you don't know if they're even thinking straight. They think they're worthless, they think they're a burden, and they have this overall sense of hopelessness and depression, and in that setting you're going to offer them a chance to kill themselves. It just is a terrible ethical nightmare when you're talking about this.
Well, good thing it didn't get passed. And do you think that it's gonna come back next legislative session or
Yeah, it
fall
it
veto?
will. The sponsor of it, which is she's the majority leader of the Illinois House, Robin Gable. She said, when she was introducing this bill that night of the vote, she said this has been basically a decade-long battle for me, and so definitely not going to give up. And they have a great sense that this is a great thing. Oftentimes, there's so many of their bills that are just bad bills. They think they think it's the best thing ever. So when they have that kind of passion and commitment, we're definitely going to see it. So we're going to have to continue to fight.
Yeah, and they cheered when it passed the House, which
Yep.
was so disgusting. I thought that was a rumor. It was
That
actually
we
real,
no,
right?
they actually did, and I see a lot of times when a big bill with a lot of debate passes, uh, they they actually cheer on the other side when it does pass. So I don't think they were cheering, you know, uh, suicide. I think they were cheering for the majority leader, Gable, and her commitment to trying to pass this bill. And as a physician, I would just want to say, I understand. I understand both sides, and I understand. We hear so many stories of the terminally ill, people who suffer terrible last days of their life. I
Mhm.
want to be really sensitive to that. And during committee hearing on this bill, we heard story after story of this, and totally understand how important this is to some people, even some people in medicine who I greatly respect, mentors of mine, colleagues of mine. They have a different mind on this. So this is one of these things where we have to be really careful, um, in what we say about this, because there are people I highly respect on the other side of this issue, especially working in medicine.
Really quick before you go, I wanted to ask you one more quick question about the
Yeah,
WHO and the FDA. So,
yeah,
this was a bill. I don't even know the number or anything, but
this
they,
is crazy.
yeah, I guess they're surrendering our state medical standards
Hmm.
to the World Health Organization, which is, by the way, an unelected foreign body.
Yeah,
The FDA is appointed, of course,
yep,
an American.
yep, yep.
So,
And it's the
yeah,
gold standard. It's the gold standard for medication review on the quality, safety, and efficacy of all of our drugs in the United States. And it's not. It's made up of doctors and scientists. It's the commissioner is appointed by the president, it's under the Department of Human Services. But this is why it happened, because, and I said it on the House floor. This is a virtue signaling bill. This is a orange man bad bill, because we hate Trump and we hate Robert Kennedy. Um, so now we hate the FDA because they're going to take away our abortion pill. Not that they are, but if they try it at all, then we're going to go to the WHO, which does not have a, well. First of all, the United States doesn't even participate anymore in the WHO, and so we're totally independent. So we don't have any participation in it, and we're going to have them review our drugs. If the FDA says they're unsafe, or there's a quality issue with it, and it says we can't sell it in the United States anymore, Illinois, the only state, is going to go to the WHO, controlled by China, and use their approval process, which they don't have any safety approval process. It's totally unworkable. It's probably illegal. I don't know how a provider would dispense a drug, prescribe and dispense, or a pharmacy would dispense it when it's not FDA approved, and the legal implications alone is crazy. And Illinois did this only to virtue signal, so they could say Orange Man bad, we love abortion.
yeah. Well, and the drugs I shared on a conservative cat clips, you guys can check those out during the show 6 to 8. It's conservative cat. We have State Representative Bill Hauter here. I'm so honored that you came onto the show and you've been answering a lot of my questions, but
Yeah,
this one is shocking, and this got passed. So, like,
yeah.
there were slivers of good news that $1.50 delivery fee not going
Hmm.
to be a thing, right?
Yeah.
And
It
then
is not. It didn't get before the House. They passed it in the Senate. They took bad votes. It's the same thing with this physician assisted suicide. They made their members take bad votes. That in some districts that's going to hurt them on especially this 150 tax, service tax. it's going to hurt a lot of the downstate Dems, which there's hardly any left anyway. But if they voted on this on the Senate side, and then they let it die in the House, so they really they shafted their members to make them now have to talk about and defend their vote on a bill that didn't pass and didn't even go before the House.
Mm-hmm.
So a terrible management at the end, also because they're a lot of times incompetent, and obviously we see this state is in, and we understand the incompetence of the party. Well, it spreads to also how they manage bills too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and they screwed over their members, just like he had said. Real quick with the WHO FDA thing.
Yeah.
If we go off the WHO standards, that's going off of, and like you said, it could be unlawful. I'd imagine that there's going to be suits against this, but how does that kind of look as far as Medicaid? So we've got Medicaid in the state. Our tax dollars are going to be going to, mifepristone, misoprostol, these abortion pills.
Yeah.
Well, they already do that. 13-year-olds can get them in the mail at this point.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but we're going to be taxpayers are going to be funding drugs that are not approved by the FDA.
Yeah.
And that is, I'm anti that, because it's like our taxpayer dollars are going towards drugs that aren't even like approved.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of these. I'm getting to understand that these bills are just virtue signaling bills. They'll never be actually utilized because, like I said, it's probably not legal. It would be a huge liability risk. They did it for all drugs because I think they had to, but they really just wanted to do it for mifepristone, the abortion pill. What it is just that they can go to their constituencies and say, we fought once again for reproductive rights and blah, blah, blah. And we can say that we will never let them take the abortion pill from you. And we protected you so much that if this, terrible Trump attempts to take this drug from you, then we're going to go to other mechanisms of a drug approval, which is total nonsense. It's absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't really, in some ways, I don't really get that incensed about this bill passing, because we all know what it's all about. It's total political games that we can say, once again, they have to have every session, they have to have one bill where they can say, we fought for reproductive rights. Last session, they were going to reinterpret emergency room procedures for, they called, I don't want to get into it too much, but they called like miscarriages, abortions, and they were protecting, those in the emergency department through EMTALA, which is a federal recognition of how you treat people in the emergency department. That was last session. It was total nonsense. Illinois wasn't going to be alone in reinterpreting EMTALA. We were going to go by what the Supreme Court says. But they could say, just like with this FDA bill, look at us protecting abortion rights.
Yeah, doctors, they're not going to write scripts for drugs that aren't approved by the FDA. No. In practice.
In practice, this will never be utilized.
Well, Bill Hauter, thank you so much for joining the Conservative Cat Show and spending so much time answering all my questions. We'll talk again soon. And folks, be sure to look up Bill Hauter on Facebook. I'm telling you, I look at his page religiously, sharing out great information for taxpayers. So be sure to follow Bill Hauter, State Representative Bill Hauter on Facebook. Really, he's got good stuff. So I kept up with that assisted physician suicide bill on your Facebook page, and I was waiting. I was like,
that was a really important bill to me. Thank you for having me on.